Hi guys, welcome to Delaware Studios. Let's get to talk about Firebase Cloud Messaging with MySQL driven database server. The scope of this application demo is we'll be setting up some server-side code written in PHP to communicate with a MySQL database to send push notifications to a particular device or all devices with their tokens saved in a MySQL database table. Typically, for one to send downstream messages via HTTP to a device or multiple devices through Firebase, some steps must be accomplished. Firstly, you need to configure the client app with Firebase messaging service. You need to generate a unique device token. Afterwards, you send messages from the Firebase console to those tokens generated. Now, for the purpose of using a MySQL server, we will intersect at the point of generating the token, which we will use persistent data storage mechanism in Android, like shared preferences, to save the token. In turn, we're going to push the token with a unique email registration to the server. From there, we could issue push notification to targeted devices or all devices with the token saved to DB. In this tutorial, we'll be using PHP to set up the tables and also the structure of the database. And we're actually going to be using Postman to issue push messages query. Without much ado, let's get started. Right there in the Android Studio, we have the source code. And to actually get yourself started with Firebase Cloud Messaging or any Firebase module, it's very fast and easy through the Android Studio environment. You easily move to Tools, click on Firebase. You have the Assistant drawer open for you. And I actually opt for the Cloud Messaging. That's why you're seeing it this way. This is where you start from. You have the Analytics, Authentication, Real-Time Database, and so on. Once you set up Cloud Messaging, you have the ability to connect your app to Firebase. That means you have to sign in with a Gmail account to the Firebase console. After that, you add the FCM to your app, and you have the dependencies added right there in the Gradle file. These are the steps to actually make a first push notification. You need to access the device registration token with the on-token refresh. Here you generate your token. You can easily log that to cart. This is where we're actually going to be saving to the shared preferences. After that, you add some manifest file, which is the Firebase instance ID service. And you have to handle the messages with your message received, majorly from the Firebase messaging service, where you can actually write a notification class, a method rather, which will actually purport or decode more about the message you received from the push. So this is just the major steps of how to actually get yourself rolling with Firebase Cloud Messaging. Now we're going to integrate with our own server, which is a MySQL server. This is the structure of the application. We have the build Gradle. Firebase messaging has been added. I've passed through all those steps. And I also added the volley, which is actually going to help us to communicate with the PHP code, which is the API in which we'll need to send the token and get that saved right there in the MySQL database. Let me head straight to the server code and let's get to understand how we structure this. I'll be using Sublime Text, where I have the files needed. Firstly, the config.php. If you're not familiar with PHP, I'll implore you to just get your hands on some PHP basics. But this is quite simple. If you've been around the OOP environment, you understand what I'm about doing at this point in time. We're just defining the username, password, the name, and the host. The username and password of the DB, the name of the database, and the host. That's just what you saw right there. And you have to define a new constant, which is the Firebase API key. How are you going to get your Firebase API key? You head straight to your Firebase console. Right there in the overview, you have a gear icon, which is the settings. You click on that, you head straight to the project settings, where you opt for the cloud messaging. Right there in the cloud messaging, you can get your server key. Just copy that and paste that right there over here where you see the server key, and you're good to go. Now in the DB Connect, this is actually, from the name implies, we're trying to connect to the database, where we have a class called DB Connect, a variable connect, which actually store the database link, an empty constructor, just like the way we used to have in Java. So this is a function or a method called connect. This method will connect to the database. However, you need to include the constants, the config.php, which you actually needed, and you need to connect to the MySQL database. We are using the MySQLi, or you can use the PDU to actually connect to the database, passing the host, the username, password, and DB name as the parameter. And you need to return the connection link. This is what will be used right there in the course of the code, whereby we're going to have an object of the connection. In the DB operation, we'll call this the functions, where we have different functions to actually carry out different duties, or call a caller method or so. Right there we have the constructor, which actually initialize the connect, the DB connect, initializing our connection link to this class, where we have it, the DB connect. Now we have a connection object. We have different methods here. The register device that takes an email and token, which actually check if the email exists. We need to verify if the user have already logged in the email. So with that we'll be able to keep that unique, and we have to generate that. So in the process of this basic application, in the sign in, or let's say the sign up page, that's when you are easily generate the token, and you get that saved right there in the MySQL DB. So we are just allowing just an email address, and that's why you have this as a parameter, and you insert the devices which we got right there into the email and token. That's the values to the columns we're going to actually use. Now let's check if the email exists. If the email exists, you're going to return the row. This is when you have to select the ID from the devices where the email is what you are actually passing in. So we have to get that returned. And now you need to get all tokens. That's when you are calling all tokens from the database, and or you're getting a token based by the email which you got. So that's actually going to be targeted to a particular device. And this is when you get all devices, get all registered devices for the database. And so the SQL query, issuing out select all from devices, and you return the results. So that's cool. Now we have for the Firebase PHP. This is actually where you send the push notifications. This function will make the actual call request to the Firebase server, and then the message is going to be sent. I won't be going into full details on each steps of this call method, which you can easily push the code to you, and I would like you to read through it, where you need to initialize the open connection. You set the curl URL, and you set the method as post, which you will be having. We're well commented, and you actually need to add the headers. You need to do some SSL support, and also the fields in the JSON format. So you have to do all that to actually get the push notification sent successfully. This is a method to get all the registered devices. So you actually get them, and you encode to JSON. So that will actually be able to be read by the client, which is the Android application. We have the register device method also here to actually register the device and send a notification or send a JSON object key value PS back to the client. We have the send multiple push. That's where you're sending to multiple devices, and this is actually also right there. And when you're sending to a single device, this is where you actually check for the email message that you actually send it to, because the email message is invariably the same with the token you're getting. So we are just like replacing an email with a token. So once you have an email, you have the token side by side, which you can easily use in sending a push notification to a single device. This is the structure of the server-side code written in PHP, and I'll be sending the source as well. So I'll employ you to look at this and get acclimatized with the way it's structured. From here, I'll head straight back to the Android Studio. Let's get to understand how we're going to set up the client side, so we'll be able to communicate appropriately with the server. Now we have the main activity. But before I straight to the main activity, let's get a look at the layout. From the layout, you understand what we're expecting. The activity main will actually be taking an edit text, which is an email address of the user, just very simple. This can actually be a form, probably a login form or a sign-up form, where you can easily authenticate the user at first. From there, you generate a unique ID. So if probably the user keeps signing in different devices, you can easily update the database to actually update the new token generated. So that's just the advanced process of actually gets this rolling in a production application. You have the button, which we actually trigger the send token. So this will trigger that, and we'll be able to send the token down to the server. So that's for the layout. Head straight to main activity. Now we need to initialize the fields, and let's get to look at the method, the send token. Actually use the progress dialog so that we'll actually have that done, and once it's been successful, the progress dialog dismisses. Cool. We need to use the shared preference. You notice we call the shared preference instance to get the device token. We'll get to look at the shared preference class where we have a method called get device token, and now we have the email, which we need to convert to text and to string, and so that we'll be able to push down to the request. We are there. What's the request? We are using Volume, which is post, and this is the link right there in the constants. Let's get to look at the constants. We have the URL, the universal resource locator, which adds the registered device. Because I'm using a server, that's why I have it in a very familiar format, the boombox.ng/FCM sitting in the FCM folder right there, the server, and the registered device.php, just like what we've saw here. So it's actually pointing to this file, the registered device.php, which we're actually going to get a JSON response as a result. Now, if you're using probably a localhost like sample WAMP, you have to get the link, which is actually the IP to that particular listener of the XAMPP. So from there, you can easily use something of this nature. The 192.168, it could be different based on your XAMPP configuration. So you can as well use localhost. So you just replace the URL, the domain name, with the IP of your XAMPP, and you still have everything set and cool. Back to the main activity. Now we're going to override two methods: the onResponse error, and also the parameters which will be added to the link. OnResponse, probably if it's successful, we get a message toasted to actually show us that. And if there's an error as well, we get an error message. Now let's look at the parameters we're going to be passing, which throws an authentication failure error. So this now we use the map whereby we're having two generics, the strings, where we're passing two strings. The first is reporting the email, which is the value of the email we got from the shared preference, and the second is the token, which we also got from the shared preference. Get to look at the shared preference on how we actually get that saved. This is the shared preference class where we place some static fields, call them constants sometimes. We have the shared preference name and the tag token. Now you synchronized based out of the box from the instance of the shared preference. Let's look at the method in question. This method will save the device token to the shared preferences, and it takes one parameter, a token, a string token. Now let's get to look at how we're going to actually put that to the editor and apply that. Now we have the key, because shared preferences also save data in key value pairs. Now we have a key called the tag token, which is also this value, and we're passing the token we got. Whereby anytime you call this class, anytime you call this method rather in the class, you need to pass in a token called a string token, and from there it's actually going to be saved and applied down to the editor, which is actually going to be saved persistently through the course or to the life cycle of the application. So we have that done. And how are we going to get that token saved to the shared pref? We're going to actually get that done from the Firebase instance ID service. So from the Firebase instance ID service, which extends the Firebase instance ID service, we should be familiar with this. This is the on-token refresh we saw right there from the assistant. Let's get to look at the assistant one more time. Over here, can you see that? The on-token refresh, which we got. And this is just this is the way you can actually get the token. And once you have this done, the refresh token is actually generated anytime you run this service, because we still need to actually log that into the manifest. So anytime you run the application, you're going to generate this token. So right there, you have the token stored in a private method, which will be run, and this method actually triggers the shared preferences saved device token method. So that's where the token will actually be saved to the shared preference class. I think we understand that. So that's cool. From here, let's get to look at the Firebase message service. The Firebase message service receives the messages from the push notification. This is also explained right there in the assistant. If you notice, we have this how to handle the message, the on message received. So you need to override this method. So once you override this method, you get to receive any cloud messaging from Firebase. So now we're going to look at this closely. On message received, if the remote message will get the data, if the size is greater than 0, definitely that means something comes in. You get the data, you convert to string, and in this we have a try and catch block here, whereby we're going to send to push notification in JSON, which is actually going to come in key value pairs. Cool. And now this send push notification is actually an inner method, which is actually going to show the normal push messages you usually see right there. So it's left to you as a developer to set up the push notification anytime you receive a message. So right there in the push notification, if you notice, we actually got that in a JSON object, and we need to decode further. So you actually need to call the data, which is the key of the JSON, and you need to parse the JSON data. And in the course of parsing, you need to get a string, which is the title, the message, and the image. So those are the 3 messages that we are expecting from the push server. And now you need to save them right there in the variable, and you create the notification manager object to actually trigger that and create an intent for the notification as well, which is based on the main activity. So if there are no image, probably because we have an image there, you can actually set that with a normal image, the normal Android drawable, which is the Android image, or if you have a particular image, probably the logo of your company or something, you can use that right there. Now if the image URL is null, probably no image is coming up, you will opt for the show mail notification. Now this M notification manager is a class, a notification class, and we created an object from that. So now we are pointing at a method right there in the class called the show small notification. So if it's that, now if it's if the image is present, we show the big notification and we pass the messages parameters appropriately, the title, message, and intent. So let's get to look at the notification manager. So this is actually going to handle our notification, and you can see it right there. Or we have for the big notification and for the small notification an ID to actually let us know which notification we are talking at. So we're going to actually show a big notification with an image. Parameters are title for message title, the message for message text, URL for the big image, and an intent that will open when you tap the notification. That's it. And it's called majorly we call it pending intent. And this is how you actually set up the result pending intent to actually trigger to the main activity. We specify that right there from the Firebase message, which is this. It's pointing to the main activity. So back there, and now we need to declare the notification compact. This is how to set up a notification, big picture style. So for that, set the summary text, build it up, set a small icon. You can even set the kind of alarm you want, or you can even set the kind of sound you want. Probably you want vibration, or you want to pick a melody somewhere in the file or in the drawable that you have. So this is just how to set up your notification, and you have that set up. So if there is no image, you set up the show small notification, and this is just how to go about that. And we have the git bitmap URL, which you actually decode the bitmap you're getting. This method will return the bitmap from an image URL, probably if you actually have image from the server. That's just how that flows. So we've virtually come to the end of the client-side application. So from here, we've been able to set up the shared preference, which actually key in right there with the Firebase instance ID service to get the token, and at the same time, the main activity, anytime you register your email, the token is being passed in, whereby we get the instance, we get the device token from the shared preference, and we have to pass that using the map with volley to the server based on the email and token. And the server is actually going to do justice to that, to dictate if the email has been registered earlier or not, and the server will virtually save the token to its appropriate table. So you have that set up, and we also have the Firebase messaging that gets the message back when the push notification is being issued, and this actually in turn sends to the push notification class we created. That's actually going to show us the drawer, the notification visibly right there in the device. Now we have that set up. Let's get to look at the manifest. Manifest, we need to register the Firebase instance ID service. If you notice, we have that specified here as well. Can you see that in the manifest? The Firebase instance ID service. We also need to register one more thing, the Firebase messaging service. All these two very important. This is actually going to run in the metadata of the application. So I'm actually going to be testing this out. We're going to be using Postman to issue out the query, to issue out the push to the particular device, and I'll be using an emulator to actually make this tested. So don't go anywhere. So right there, we have the application launched right there in the emulator. So we need to actually place in the email address. So in here, I'm going to type in an email address to register the device. So let me start off with Come. So click on register device. So we have the device registered successfully. So I'm actually going to check that first from the PHP my admin. Let me get, I have one device registered earlier with ayu@gmail.com, but now it should be bamoyk @yahoo.com rather. So let's have a refresh to see that load up. Cool. Can you see that? And the token generated as well. So that's actually saved correctly into the database. From here, I extract to Postman. Now let's get all registered devices based on the source we have here. The get registered devices source, which actually encodes JSON. So I'm actually going to run the code, the query rather. So it's actually a post, and it's a get rather, because I'm actually getting from the server. I'm not posting at this time, so I have to change that to get and send that. Cool. I have one ayu@gmail with the token, and second with an ID of 2 bamoyk@yahoo.com with a token. Cool, working perfectly. Now I will decide to send a single push notification to a device, which will be to the bamoyk@yahoo.com, which is the emulator. Now I'm going to modify the link with URL now, which will be send single push .php, send single push .php. Now modify that to post and create the body, which will actually be in key value PS. The first will be the email address, which will be, first of all, lock in the key email, and with a title of bamoyk@yahoo.com. Another key, the title, let's call it FCM with MySQL. Cool. And the third is going to be the message itself. Testing out. You can also add the fourth parameter, which is the image. Right? I don't have any image link at present, so I'll keep to that. So we're going to have a default image setup. So now let me send that to the server. Can you see the first success and now the message? So let me look at our emulator. Cool, we have it. Let me draw down the drawer. Can you see that? FCM with MySQL. Testing out. The push message came right then from the PHP code with the MySQL server database, which houses the token. So we have that set up. So you can see that it's actually working perfectly. No flaws. That's fine. So you click on that, we launch the main activity, which we set up as we did right there in the client code. Now if we are pushing to all devices, now we have 2 tokens right there in the database, unique to 2 devices, an emulator and another Android device. So I'm actually going to run this link, which is actually going to be pointed at multiple devices. So it's going to be send multiple push. Let me still maintain. Now this time I won't be needing the email, but the title and messages, fine. Now I'm going to push send multiple, push. I'm correct. So I'm actually going to push this down to the devices. And you have that. I have two success. And I'm right checking on my device. I could see the notification. Very perfect. And let me check the emulator as well. Can you see that right there in the emulator? FCM with MySQL testing out. So I can now post a push notification from the MySQL database running PHP server code down to multiple devices. With this analysis, I hope you understand all what I've been doing right from the beginning of this tutorial. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. I'll be pushing the source code to my GitHub account as usual, likewise with the server code. So you can easily clone that and or download it and get it started with Android Studio. And please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Have a blessed time. Bye bye for now.